If every hard feeling sends you into avoidance, you don't just avoid stress. You avoid the feedback that tells you what you can handle, where you break, and what needs to change. Taleb's idea is simple. A fragile system breaks under stress. A resilient system takes the hit and returns to where it started. An anti-fragile system learns from a manageable hit and becomes better built for the next one. This isn't an excuse for burnout, chaos, or staying in a bad job because it builds character. That is damage with good branding. The useful question is whether the stress has a limit, a lesson, and enough room to recover. By the end, you'll have a protocol for choosing stress that trains you instead of draining you. Think about a muscle. Leave it alone forever, and it doesn't stay neutral. It loses strength because the system gets no reason to maintain capacity. Put it under far too much load, too soon, and you injure it. That isn't growth either. The load exceeds what the system can absorb, so recovery can't keep up with the damage. The useful range sits between those two states. You apply enough load to create a signal, then you recover and adapt. Next time, the same load asks less of you. That is the basic shape of antifragility. A fragile pattern treats all discomfort as a warning light. You feel exposed when you need to send a rough draft, so you revise it again. You feel unsure about a choice, so you open more tabs. You feel tension before a hard talk, so you wait for a cleaner moment that tends not to arrive. The relief is real. The cost sits further out. When you remove every small strain, your threshold drops. A normal work request, an unclear email, or a decision with limited downside can start to feel like a high-stakes event because your system has stopped getting practice with uncertainty. That is fragile. It isn't weakness, and it isn't a character flaw. It's the expected output of a system that keeps proving to itself that discomfort requires escape. Resilience is a step up, but it has a limit. A resilient person can take pressure, finish the hard week, deal with the difficult client, and keep functioning. Then they return to the same setup that created the strain. They survive the load. Nothing in the system changes. You see this in people who treat recovery like a pit stop before the next identical mess. They pride themselves on handling chaos, which is useful, right up until their whole role becomes absorbing chaos created by bad scope, bad rules, and late decisions. Antifragility asks a different question. Not, can you endure this? It asks, what can this stress teach your system before the cost gets too high? That means the stress stays small enough to recover from. You take the action, notice what happened, then adjust the next exposure. The point isn't to prove you're tough. The point is to raise your working threshold through contact with the thing you used to avoid. Take imperfect work. You send a version when it meets a clear standard, even though part of you wants another day. The stress comes from being seen before you feel ready. Then you receive actual feedback, which is usually more useful than the feedback generated by your own worst-case model. Or take a hard talk. You don't wait until every word feels safe. You name one concrete issue, ask one direct question, and stay long enough to hear the answer. The talk may still feel awkward, but awkwardness isn't proof that you chose wrong. A bounded decision works the same way. You choose between two workable options by a set time, with a limit on the downside, instead of researching until one option glows with divine approval. It won't. Most decisions arrive wearing a cheap disguise. Working without more research is another form of exposure. You use what you know to build the next small piece, and you let the output reveal what information you actually lack. Research can reduce uncertainty, But past a certain point, it mostly delays contact with reality. Now, stress only helps inside a recoverable range. If the task destroys your sleep, removes your ability to think, or leaves no room to repair the cost, you're not building capacity. You are exceeding it. Signal tells you where to adapt. Damage tells you the dose was wrong. So you need both load and recovery. You need a hard enough action to create useful data, but a tight enough scope that you can return, learn, and try again. Without recovery, the system degrades. Without load, it stays untested. Knowing this changes nothing if you keep switching between total avoidance and random overload. One keeps your threshold low. The other teaches your system that stress is unsafe. Start with an audit, not a promise to be braver. Name the exact pressure you avoid, then name the escape move that follows. Because vague stress turns into vague plans, and vague plans are where avoidance rents an apartment. Maybe you avoid sending work that could be judged. Your escape is editing past the point of use. Maybe you avoid a hard call. Your escape is writing a longer message, then revising it until the call still needs to happen. Write the loop in one line. When I face this pressure, I escape by doing this. That gives you something you can change. I'm stressed doesn't. Next, sort the stress. Productive stress has a defined scope, a short duration, a real recovery period, and a lesson you can take into the next attempt. Harmful stress tends to have none of those things. It expands, stays on, and demands more from a system that has already run out of room. A difficult meeting with a clear goal and an hour afterward to reset can train you. An endless week of urgent work, poor sleep, and no control over the demands isn't a training plan. Calling it growth doesn't fix the design. It just gives the damage a nicer label. Set a minimum viable exposure. This is the smallest action that puts you in contact with the thing you avoid without flooding the whole system. If you avoid feedback, send one section, not the full project. If you avoid a hard conversation, ask for 15 minutes and name one issue. If you avoid choosing, pick the next step that commits you for a week, not the choice that seems to decide your whole future. Keep the exposure small on purpose. You aren't trying to prove you can survive the worst version of the task. You're giving your system evidence that it can enter the task, stay there, and leave with usable information. Then install a decision gate before stress begins. A decision gate is one condition that ends preparation and starts contact with the real work. For research, the rule might be, after 3 reliable sources, write the first page. For a proposal, it might be, once the problem, scope, and due date are clear, send the draft. The rule has to exist before you feel uncertain, because uncertainty is very good at arguing for one more hour of being responsible. Repeat the same exposure more than once. The first hard call may feel like a threat. By the 4th or 5th, you start to see parts. The opening feels tense. The middle improves. The feared outcome rarely arrives in the form your mind ordered. That shift matters. Discomfort becomes data. Right, that. Values something can be a dull route, or no go, or serious joy. I'm from a terror out for. Discomfort becomes data. You can work with data. Recovery belongs inside the protocol. After strain, stop adding strain just because you finally have momentum. Rest. Review what happened. Reduce scope if the last dose cost more than expected. because adjustment is the part that turns pressure into learning. Use a short after-action review. Ask, what felt hard? What actually broke? What held? What changes next time? Keep the answers concrete. I panicked isn't useful enough. I lost focus after 20 minutes because I had no outline gives you a constraint for the next round. You prepare the outline first, then repeat the exposure. Watch for false antifragility, random overload, lost sleep, constant urgency, and work that never ends. Do not train you because they contain stress. A system improves from stress only when it can detect the signal and respond. If every part of your week stays on fire, you don't have a lesson. You have a fire. Small bets give you a cleaner way to build capacity. Try a low-cost version of the thing that scares you with a limit on time, money, or scope. Publish a short piece before building a full series. Test a new offer with a few conversations before rebuilding your business around it. Each bet keeps the downside contained while giving you new options if it works. That is the useful part of Taleb's idea for your own work. You don't need certainty before contact. You need a setup where contact can't ruin you. The goal isn't to become someone who enjoys stress. You might never enjoy it. The goal is to build a system that can use it, instead of treating every hard signal as a command to retreat. Stress helps when you choose the dose, learn from the signal, and recover before you repeat it. Subscribe for more systems that turn overthinking into a clear next action. Then watch the next video on breaking the restart loop before another hard day becomes a new plan.